Shalom.
Shabbat
Sameach. I am Yahuditya Bat Yahweh,
And I'm Yafaya Bat Yahweh.
and we are blessed tonight to share with you on this day of Shavuot. And here in the United States, we celebrate Shavuot for 2 days, and which is a giving of the Torah. Do you want to share a little bit of what the purpose of
Shavuot?
Shavuot is?
Sure. So the purpose of Shavuot, like you said, is it is a celebration of the giving of the Torah off of Mount Sinai. And in between Pesach and Shavuos, we count the Omer. It's kind of funny because my husband refers to it as the long holiday. This is the long one where every night you're doing something in between. And what we're doing is we're saying a specific prayer, the counting of the Omer prayer, that it helps us to prepare ourselves for the giving of the Torah. A lot of times, the different rabbis, they speak about it being like the children of Israel, like their infant times, basically. So during that time, what we do as we think about the counting is we talk about the Sephirot in reference to each individual week. So the Sephirot is a reminder of the different characteristics of Father Yahweh, and we speak about them within another characteristic. So one characteristic within another. So one example might be Chesed, loving kindness, within the context of the Malchus or the kingdom of Father Yahweh. And so we do that every single night for the full 49 days. And on the 50th day, it is a celebration of Shavuos. And like you said, inside of Israel, that celebration is a single day. And outside of Israel, that celebration is 2 days.
That's right. So every day for 49 days, the Almighty One has commanded us in His Torah to count. And so this count is important because it purifies us from every evilness and from every impurity that we might have, so that our souls, the souls of Israel, may be cleansed from their defilement. And that's the actual prayer. In Leviticus, it says in 23:15 through 18, you shall count for yourselves from the day of rest, from the day in which you bring the Omer as a wave offering. The counting shall be for 7 weeks. They shall be complete weeks until the day of the 7th week. You shall count 50 days. And that's what we've been doing as for these 7 weeks. In the instructions and the prayers that Father Yahweh gives us, he tells us the blessings of Yahweh comes down into the world when we're on the 50th day for Shavuot. And so the worlds, as a matter of fact, in the prayer, it says, it brings blessing of Yahweh in the worlds. So you got to think about that too, because it's plural. And at that point, abundant bounty will be bestowed upon all the worlds and rectify our nephesh, which is our body, our ruach, which is our spirit, and neshama, which is our soul, from every baseness and defect. So that's what we've been reading. And as she says, we've been going through this for 49 days. To Israel, this counting is a powerful, world-changing instructions, and they remind us to remember and to realize where every blessing that we get in this world, every blessing where it comes from. As she says, she mentioned about the barley and the wheat. And so that is the agricultural portion of the Torah. So we're blessed. The waving of the barley, waving on of the wheat brings blessings to us. So it's important for us to build up and to carry His image by doing everything that he's commanded us to do through all of these sephirots.
I'm not sure if I mentioned that before, but that is an aspect of it. So there's one side of it where it's very much during that 7 full weeks, us preparing ourselves for receiving the Torah. But from a agricultural side, we also call this Moed the Festival of Weeks. And it's a reminder that the Festival of First Fruits. It's a reminder that, we work all spring very hard to get the ground ready, very much like we're getting ourselves ready. And at this point, this is when our first fruits are available for harvest. And that's also true for us. Our first fruits, we are the first fruits.
Amen. So it takes me back to the children of Israel as they came out of Mitzrayim. They had been under a lot of pressure, a lot of turmoil, and that was placed upon them by the old king. And as they came through, and they were walking through the desert for these 40 days. Father Yahweh constantly had to remind them about where they were now, and that they didn't have to worry about the things that they were going through in Mitzrayim. You can almost imagine many of them, because as we know the story of Moshe bringing them out of Israel, they were going through a lot of bitter experiences. Did you want to say anything about that?
I'm not so sure I want to say too much, but I think I could just add that, as a reminder about what Pesach is that Pesach was our deliverance from Mitzrayim. And so we've been instructed to not think about it as, somebody else, an ancestral deliverance, but like you personally, your deliverance from Mitzrayim this time is a time for your personal reflection and processing, and that baby time. And sometimes when we think about even the plants, there is a miraculous moment when, I don't know if you've planted things, but a miraculous moment when it finally emerges from the soil. And it's so incredible because so many things had to come together in order for that plant to be able to sprout, and for able to get what it needs in order to grow and thrive and be nourished. And in that same regard, this time is a reminder for us about those miracles. So the miracle of deliverance, the miracle of surviving in the desert for all of those days, being reflective, the sin of the golden calf, and then the receiving of the Torah is really the cumulative celebration there.
Right. And with Father Yahweh, who is the Melech. He is the king over all of us. So he brought these laws, these new laws to us in the Haseret. And many times, in following those laws, people many times tend to think that when you have a bunch of laws, there's taxing and their punishment. But actually, with Father Yahweh, all of the things that we see and do in the Haseret Adibrot, in the Torah, they're really a time of training. It's a good training time for us, teaching us to learn that, we have these laws, we have these things that we must follow, and that they're good for us. They're good for our spirits. They're good for our souls, which is the purpose of going through the 49 days. All of those things, they build us up. And
and like Rabia used to say, it's like teachings, instructions, the guidelines, the fence posts. If we're thinking about, those infant times, if you've had a child, you recognize there are more than 10 rules to follow that you're trying to convey to your children. And the 10, the Asara Hadabro, are really just the categories of ways of thinking about things in this world, how to show honor and esteem to Father Yahweh, and also how to show honor and esteem to our brothers and sisters in Father Yahweh, all of the children of Israel.
Amen. And they had to see that because, again, as you they had gone through some difficult times, and those things they did have to see, and they did have to learn. And an example would have been when they were in need of water, they began to complain after being there for a while, and many times, you think, well, why are they complaining? Father Yahweh has brought them out of Mitzrayim. But you have to realize that they have gone through a period of decades where they have been enslaved. And when there was no water, that meant that unless they were able to do something to gather more straw or make more bricks or do something, their water was limited. Whereas Father Yahweh showed them, no, when here, I brought you here and I provide all of your needs. And Moshe, I believe it was Moshe, struck the rock, and the water came from the rock, and they were filled.
Amen.
Anything else? Okay. Well, we know that Father Yahweh has blessed us in many ways. So why don't we go ahead and get into the book of Ruth? Because to me, the book of Ruth is one of those events that help us to understand the Aseret HaDibrot, because we see all of those things in the Aseret HaDibrot in the book of Ruth. At least I try to identify them as we read them.
Amen. All right, so if we'll turn to the book of Ruth, if you have your Chumash. Oh, actually, no, your Tanakh. Because it is one of the Ketuvim, one of the writings. And so we're just going to go ahead and we are going to read the book of Ruth. So starting at chapter 1, verse 1. And it happened in the days when the judges judged that there was a famine in the land. And a man went from Bethlehem in Yehuda to sojourn in the fields of Moab, he, his wife, and his 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech. The name of his wife, Naomi, and the name of his 2 sons, Machlon and Chilion, Euphrates of Bethlehem in Yehuda. They came to the field of Moab, and there they remained. Verse 3.
Okay, so we see in those verses that we have what is it? Elimelech, and we have Naomi and their family because of the famine. And there we have a time where they see and their experiencing a traumatic moment. There's no food, so because of that, they take their 2 sons and they sojourn into the fields. And you can go ahead.
Verse 3. Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. They married Moabite women. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the second, Ruth. And they lived there about 10 years. The 2 of them, Machlon and Chilion, also died, and the woman was left of her 2 children and of her husband. Verse 6. She then arose along with her daughters-in-law to return from the fields of Moab, for she had heard in the fields of Moab that Yahweh had remembered his people by giving them food. She left the place where she had been, her 2 daughters-in-law with her, and they set out on the road to return to the land of Yehuda. Verse 8. Then Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, Go, return each of you to her mother's house. May Yahweh deal kindly with you as you have dealt kindly with the dead and with me. May Yahweh grant that you may find security, each in the home of her husband. She kissed them, and they raised their voice and wept. And they said to her, No, we will return with you to your people. But Naomi said, Turn back, my daughters. Why should you come with me? Have I more sons in my womb who could become husbands to you? Turn back, my daughters. Go, for I am too old to have a husband. Even if I were to say there is hope for me, and even if I were to have a husband tonight, and even bear sons, would you wait for them until they were grown up? Would you tie yourselves down for them, not to marry anyone else? No, my daughters, I am very embittered on account of you, for the hand of Yahweh has gone forth against me. Verse 14. They raised their voice and wept again. Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. So she said, Look, your sister-in-law has returned to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law. But Ruth said, Do not urge me to leave you, to turn back from following you. For where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people are my people, and your mighty one is my mighty one. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. Thus may Yahweh do to me, and so may he do more, if anything but death separates me from you. Verse 18. When she saw that she was determined to go with her, she stopped arguing with her. And the two of them went on until they came to Bethlehem. Verse 19. And it came to pass when they arrived in Bethlehem, the entire city was tumultuous over them. And the woman said, Could this be Naomi? She said to them, Do not call me Naomi, pleasant one. Call me Mara, embittered one. For the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I was full when I went away, but Yahweh has brought me back empty. Why should you call me Naomi? Yahweh has testified against me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me. Verse 22. And so Naomi returned, and Ruth, the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, with her, who returned from the fields of Moab. They came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley festival. Chapter 2, verse 1. Naomi had a relative through her husband, a man of substance, from the family of Elimelech. His name was Boaz. Verse 2. Ruth, the Moabite, said to Naomi, Let me go out to the field and glean among the ears of grain behind someone in whose eyes I shall find favor. She said to her, Go, my daughter. So she went. She came and gleaned in the fields behind the harvesters, and her fate made her happen upon a parcel of land belonging to Boaz, who was the family of Elimelech. Verse 4. Behold, Boaz arrived from Bethlehem. He said to the harvesters, Yahweh be with you. And they answered him, May Yahweh bless you. Boaz then said to his servant, who was overseeing the harvesters, To whom does that young woman belong? The servant who was overseeing the harvesters replied, She is a Moabite girl, the one who returned with Naomi from the fields of Moab. And she had said, Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the harvesters. So she came and has stood since the morning until now, except for her resting a little in the hut. Verse 8. Then Boaz said to Ruth, Hear me well, my daughter. Do not go to glean in another field, and don't leave here, but stay close to my maidens. Keep your eyes on the field which they are harvesting, and follow after them. I have ordered the servants not to molest you. Should you become thirsty, go to the jugs and drink from that which the servants have drawn. Then she fell on her face, bowing down to the ground, and said to him, Why have I found favor in your eyes that you should take special note of me, though I am a foreigner? Verse 11. Boaz replied and said to her, I have been faithfully informed of that you have done that of all that you have done for your mother-in-law after the death of your husband, how you left your father and mother and the land of your birth and went to a people who had not known yesterday or earlier. May Yahweh reward your deed, and may your payment be full from Yahweh, the mighty one of Israel, under whose wings you have come to seek refuge. Then she said, May I continue to find favor in your eyes, because you have comforted me, and because you have spoken to the heart of your maidservant, though I am not even as worthy as one of your maidservants. Verse 14. At mealtime, Boaz said to her, Come over here and partake of the bread and dip your morsel in the vinegar. So she sat beside the harvesters. He handed her parched grain, and she ate and was satisfied, and had some left over. Verse 15. Then she got up to glean, and Boaz ordered his servants, saying, Let her glean even among the sheaves. Do not embarrass her. And even deliberately pull out some for her from the heaps, and leave them for her to glean. Don't rebuke her. Verse 17. So she gleaned in the field until evening, and she beat out what she had gleaned. It was about an ephah of barley. She carried it and came to the city. Her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned, and she took out and gave her what she had left over after eating her fill. Where did you glean today? Her mother-in-law asked her. Where did you work? May the one that took such generous notice of you be blessed. So she told her mother-in-law by whom she had worked, and said, The name of the man by whom I worked today was Boaz. Verse 20. Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, Blessed is he to Yahweh, who has not failed in his kindness to the living or to the dead. Naomi then said to her, The man is closely related to us. He is one of our redeemed kinsmen. Verse 21. And Ruth the Moabite said, What's more, he even said to me, Stay close to my servants until they have finished all my harvest. Naomi said to her daughter-in-law Ruth, It is fine, my daughter, that you go out with his maidens, so that you will not be annoyed in another field. Verse 23. So she stayed close to Boaz's maidens to glean until the end of the barley harvest and of the wheat harvest. Then she stayed at home with her mother-in-law. Chapter 3. Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, My daughter, I must seek security for you, that I may go well with you. Now Boaz, our relative, with whose maidens you have been, will be winnowing barley tonight on the threshing floor. Therefore bathe and anoint yourself, don your finery, and go down to the threshing floor, but do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. And when he lies down, note the place where he lies, and go over, uncover his feet, and lie down. He will tell you what you are to do. She replied, All that you say to me, I will do. Verse 6. So she went down to the threshing floor and did everything as her mother-in-law instructed her. Boaz ate and drank, and his heart was merry. He went to lie down at the end of the grain pile, and she came stealthily, uncovered his feet, and lay down. In the middle of the night, the man was startled and turned about, and behold, there was a woman lying at his feet. He said, Who are you? And she answered, I am your handmaid, Ruth. Spread your robe over your handmaid, for you are a redeemer. Verse 10. And he said, You are blessed of Yahweh, my daughter. You have made your latest act of kindness greater than the first, in that you have not gone after the younger men, be they poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not fear. Whatever you say, I will do for you. For all the men in the gate of my people know that you are a worthy woman. Now, while it is true that I am a redeemer, there is also another redeemer closer than I. Stay the night, then in the morning, if he will redeem you, fine, let him redeem. But if he does not want to redeem you, then I swear that as Yahweh lives, I will redeem you. Lie down until the morning. Verse 14. So she lay at his feet until the morning, and she arose before one man could recognize another, for he said, let it not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor. And he said, hold out the shawl that is upon you and grasp it. She held it, and he measured out 6 measures of barley and set it on her. Then he went to the city. Verse 16. She came to her mother-in-law, who said, who are you, my daughter? So she told her all that the man had done for her. And she said, he gave me these 6 measures of barley, for he said to me, do not go empty-handed to your mother-in-law. Verse 18. Then she said, sit patiently, my daughter, until you know how the matter will turn out. And the man will not rest until he settles the matter today. Chapter 4. Boaz, meanwhile, had gone up to the gate and sat down there. Just then, the Redeemer of whom Boaz had spoken passed by. He said, come over, sit down here, Ploni Almoni. And he came over and sat down. He then took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, sit here, and they sat down. Verse 3. Then he said to the Redeemer, the parcel of land which belonged to our brother Elimelech is being offered for sale by Naomi, who has returned from the fields of Moab. I resolved that I should inform you to this effect. Buy it in the presence of those sitting here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you are willing to redeem, redeem. But if it will not be redeemed, tell me, that I may know, for there is no one else to redeem it but you, and I am after you. And he said, I am willing to redeem. Chapter 5. Then Boaz said, the day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you must also buy it from Ruth, the Moabite woman of the deceased, to perpetuate the name of the deceased on his inheritance. The Redeemer said, then I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I imperil my own inheritance. Take over my redemption responsibility on yourself, for I am unable to redeem. Formerly, this was done in Israel in cases of redemption and exchange transactions to validate in any matter. One would draw off his shoe and give it to the other. This was the process of ratification in Israel. So when the Redeemer said to Boaz, buy it for yourself, he drew off his shoe. Verse 9. And Boaz said to the elders and to all the people, you are witness this day that I have bought all that was Elimelech's and all that was Chilon's and Machlon's from the hand of Naomi. And what is more, I have also acquired Ruth, the Moabite, the wife of Machlon, as my wife, to perpetuate the name of the deceased on his inheritance, that the name of the deceased not be cut off from among his brethren and from the gate of this place. You are witnesses today. Verse 11. Then all the people who were at the gate and the elders said, we are witnesses. May Yahweh make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and like Leah, both of whom built up the house of Israel. May you prosper in Ephrath and be famous in Bethlehem. And may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Yehudah, through the offspring which Yahweh will give you by this young woman. Verse 13. And so Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife, and he came to her. Yahweh let her conceive, and she bore a son. And the woman said to Naomi, blessed is Yahweh, who has not left you without a redeemer today. May his name be famous in Israel. He will become your life restorer to sustain your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you, has borne him, and he is better to you than 7 sons. Verse 16. Naomi took the child and held it to her bosom, and she became his nurse. The neighborhood women gave him a name, saying, a son is born to Naomi. They named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. Now, these are the generations of Perez. Perez begot Hezron, and Hezron begot Ram, and Ram begot Aminadab, and Aminadab begot Nashon, and Nashon begot Salma, and Salma begot Boaz, and Boaz begot Obed, and Obed begot Jesse, and Jesse begot David. And that was the book of Ruth.
Amen. And we see that Elimelech and his wife Naomi, with their 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion, they traveled to Moab because there was a famine in the land. They originally were from Bethlehem of they were originally from they were Ephraimites or Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judea. And the sons, Machlon, Chilion, and the father, Elimelech, they died. And that left Ruth, Naomi, and Orpah, who was the other daughter-in-law. Orpah was married to Chilion, and Ruth was married to Machlon. Now, in Israel's tradition or culture, once a husband has died within a family, if there is a brother, then he takes her in, and so that the brother's line or the brother's lineage will continue. Did you want to say anything about that?
Only a couple of things. One of them being that this is a story that's routinely read during this time of the year. And it's poignant to me because both of the two stories, both Pesach, the Pesach account and this account of Ruth, are both people that were not born into Israel. They're both sojourners. They are, if we're thinking about Moshe's adopted mother is the sister of Paro. And in this case, we have Ruth, who is a Moabite, and she's referred to as a Moabite. In both of those accounts, I think one of the things that you can take away is that sometimes there's like some exclusivity in this idea of who can partake in these Moedim. And ultimately, it's that, the Moedim are for all that wish to partake in it, even throughout the 49 days and the growing in the different Sephirot. What we learn is that the children of Israel, they are the chosen people in that they chose to follow, they are choosing to follow Father Yahweh, and they are being called to follow Father Yahweh. And in both of these accounts, it's a reminder that it's not something that, you're just born into this like exclusive club, but rather if you have been called to, follow Father Yahweh, then you are grafted then into it. Israel. And like you were saying, there was a portion in here where Naomi was definitely saying, go back to your land. Yes. I don't have any more sons. There's not any way that I can have any more sons. And so to have you here is an extra burden for you because I am just a burden. And what we see Ruth doing is Ruth, refusing to leave to go her back. Side.
Right. She refuses, even after she asked her several times to go back to her land.
And so, again, this idea of when you're called to do something for Father Yahweh, that is the thing that you do. And then at the conclusion, this climactic genealogy where it kind of leaves and we're reminded that her lineage is the lineage that brings forth King David. It's the lineage that brings forth King Solomon. It's the lineage that brings forth the Mashiach. And so her loving kindness, her chesed, and her obedience to Father Yahweh,
following Father Yahweh and her instructions,
the way that it definitely,
to not give up, because she definitely was in poverty once she went back to Bethlehem. She with Naomi, they definitely were in poverty.
And that's with her gleaning the wheat. I think one of the reasons why we read this story during this time is because it is during, like I said, the festival of first fruits. And so this idea that this is the time of year when this account actually took place. And we get that from those verses that talk about gleaning the barley and gleaning the wheat.
And Ruth, as we know, she converted. And so she she was known to have Hesed. And even Boaz recognized the overflowing loving kindness in her when soon as he met her, he knew that there was something different about it. He had heard the stories that had been said, how she was with Naomi and how she didn't leave her side, and that she was there not just for herself, but she was also there so that her mother-in-law was sustained.
Amen. And I think that part was definitely highlighted when you saw how discouraged that Naomi. I don't know why I'm having trouble saying Naomi right now, but how Naomi was talking about herself. She said, that Father Yahweh was, judging against her, and that her new name, she had tried to change her name to Mara.
Uh-huh.
And then in the scriptures, it literally tells you what Mara meant, because she felt like she was embittered. And I feel like Ruth, did a lot in order to support Naomi through this very difficult time in her own personal life where she was feeling very discouraged. And I think there's a lesson probably there for us as well.
And yeah, it is. And what did she have to leave? Her father, her mother, her kindred. And she was blessed because she listened to Yahweh and to what her mother-in-law had.
But I think it also goes back into what you were saying earlier around Pesach and how the trauma of slavery and the impact it had on the children of Israel. In this respect, we kind of see a similar trauma. Not exactly the same. So it's not
but it is a trauma.
It's not the trauma of slavery, but it is the overcoming of trauma in that her trauma was that she lost her husband, she lost her 2 sons, and so in her mind she had lost everything.
And she had once, and she even in Moab, because I think she was known as a princess in Moab, so she even lost her royal name.
Naomi. Naomi.
Ruth.
Naomi. But for Naomi, I think the biggest piece is that shared trauma, much like the children of Israel had this shared trauma, Ruth was able to help her kind of process some of those emotions, so that we see this huge character arc with Naomi. And the scriptures never really refer to her as Mara. She wants to be referred to as Mara. She says that she's embittered. And then the scriptures every time after that just continue to refer to her as Naomi. So it's a good reminder for us, I think, to say, even in times of trauma, it's this moment of Gamzu Tova, which is, even in times of trauma, this too is for your good. Yeah. So for the Israelite people leaving Mitzrayim, we read the account, and the people were like, you brought us out here to die. Right. We would have been better going back over to, we should have just stayed in Egypt. That was that trauma kind of bubbling up. Yeah. And we had to work through that. And those 49 days, or those 7 weeks wandering through the desert, is the equivalent of us as a people working through that trauma. And in this account, all of Ruth's work in supporting Naomi, going and gleaning in fields of people that she didn't know, and trying to just get what she could in that impoverished state, was another, hey, we're going to work through this trauma. And in the process of working through the trauma, Father Yahweh is going to take care of you.
And he brought Boaz into the picture at that time, which is Hod. He was very humble. He was an old man, and she was young. And he was, I think, the nephew of
Naomi.
Of Naomi. Well, there was another relative that was closer, and you read that, to Naomi, who was the brother of her husband. His name, there was a relative that was closer. Let's see if I could find that. Well, Boaz was the nephew. But there was the other one, the one that they went to. I don't think they gave his name. They gave him a fictitious name or something. I don't think they gave his name, but Boaz went to him. He just didn't take Naomi and to become his and Ruth. He went to him and told him that she was of their
Redeemer.
lineage.
They just called him the Redeemer.
Yeah. And that was actually Elimelech's brother. So he had a closer, relationship. But he let Boaz, go ahead and continue the lineage for
Ploni Almoni. Was it Ploni Almoni?
Yeah.
Interesting. I think the last piece that I think is important here has to do with again bearing fruit. And in this case, if we're talking about Ruth, the bearing fruit was the lineage,
lineage, right?
And so in that, you were talking about the rule where if one of the brothers dies, then the widow marries the other brother. And the whole point of that is to not lose the lineage of the family of the brother. And in this case, Ruth also, this was before it was even a mitzvah, right?
Yeah,
before it was even a mitzvah, we see that she was also bearing fruit for Naomi's family, for the lineage that, like I said, again,
King David.
Yes, eventually for King David, King Solomon, and the Mashiach. Right. So it's a very, it's a hugely important account of the importance of humility, spiritual fortitude, triumph over adversity, and then just like
and your overflowing love and kindness, and
potential for greatness.
Just being generous. And so you see all of the Sephirot in the story of Ruth.
Amen.
Amen.
So we praise Father Yahweh for the account of Ruth. And as a reminder for Shavuos, another tradition is that you read the 10 Commandments. So there's two places to read those 10 Commandments. One of them is in Shemot or Exodus. And the other one is in Deuteronomy or Devarim. And so we do encourage you to read both of those accounts. One of them being the account directly like from Father Yahweh, and the other one being Moshe's account of Father Yahweh's account. And kind of comparing and contrasting those two readings, because there's some interesting insights to be had there. We praise Father Yahweh for being able to spend some time with you and reading the book of Ruth. And in our reminders to continue to grow and to be able to provide our spiritual fruits to Father Yahweh by following the Torah and
his instructions.
Amen.
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 So on that note, we say Chag Sameach and Shabbat Shalom.
לך דודי לקראת קלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת קלה, פני שבת נקבלה. שמעו וזעקו בדיבור אחד ישמיענו אל המאוחד. אדוני אחד ושמו אחד, ושמו תפארת ולתהילה. לך דודי לקראת קלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת קלה, פני שבת נקבלה.
It's been a huge amount of research out of Harvard about what it does for grandparents to have proximity to their grandchildren. Like, if you're a grandparent and you see and you interact with your grandchild more often, you're likely to live longer. You're likely to have higher levels of a sense of purpose and meaning and connection. You're likely to laugh more. You're even more likely to recover from illness more often. I've seen that in the eye.
Keep pushing, you will get there soon. Keep dreaming till you reach the moon. You gotta dig down deep. Your heart is so unique. There's no one on earth quite like you. Like a raindrop rising from the ocean, you're gonna find your way. Like a ray of light set in motion, you're gonna find your way.
Shalom, beloved. Shabbat Shalom, Chag Sameach. I hope everyone is having a blessed day 2 of their Shavuot and a blessed Shabbat. I wanted to just let you all know that coming up next is a replay of the video we saw yesterday about loving people where they are and connecting this, of course, to the unity at the foot of Mount Sinai, which, of course, was not about everyone being in no conflict. There was a harmonizing of themselves. That's how they were able to be in oneness, and that was a ripple effect that was created by Yahweh coming to Yahweh's mountain in the desert of sin, in the wilderness. So here it is again. I encourage you all to jot down some notes and enjoy.
We've all been there. We've all had that friend who keeps making the same mistakes. That family member who refuses to see what seems so obvious to us. That partner who won't meet us where we desperately need them to be. And in those moments, we pour enormous amounts of energy into an invisible battle. Trying to pull people toward growth, toward change, toward the version of themselves we can see so clearly, even if they cannot. But what if the entire premise is flawed? What if the very act of trying to change someone is not only futile, but actually works against the connection we're seeking? What if learning to love people where they are, truly, deeply, without reservation or agenda, is one of the most radical and transformative things we can do, both for them and for ourselves? This isn't about lowering standards or accepting mistreatment. It's not about becoming a doormat or abandoning your needs. It's about something far more nuanced and paradoxically far more powerful. It's about recognizing that everyone is on their own journey, moving at their own pace, and that your attempts to accelerate their progress often create more resistance than growth. It's about understanding that love, in its truest form, doesn't demand that people be different in order to be worthy of it.
I'm moving polyester mountains in my room. I'm talking to my ceiling, I've been asking what to do. Oh my god, this shit got way too real too soon. All my knuckles turning white, cause I'm running out of moves. I'm having a crisis, don't know who decided that being young was never having fun. Life's moving me too fast, I'm dealing with whiplash, and I can't keep up. I'm in a blue phase. I'm wasting away golden days, sitting in the silence, staring at my eyelids, hoping that the pressure turns me to a diamond. New page, I need a new page. Blue phase, I'm in my blue phase.
The weight of wanting. When you want someone to change, you're essentially living in two realities at once. There's the reality of who they actually are right now, their current behaviors, perspectives, limitations, and patterns. And then there's the reality of who you wish they were, the idealized version you've constructed in your mind, the person you believe they could become if only they would try harder, see clearer, do better. This split creates a constant state of tension. Every interaction becomes filtered through the gap between these two versions. You can't fully be present with who they are because you're so focused on who they aren't. You offer advice they didn't ask for. You drop hints you hope they'll pick up on. You feel frustrated when they don't seem to be evolving in the direction you've mapped out for them. And underneath it all runs a current of disappointment, sometimes subtle, sometimes overwhelming, that they haven't yet transformed into the person you need them to be. The irony is that this very dynamic often prevents the growth you're hoping for. When people feel the weight of your expectations, when they sense that your love comes with conditions attached, something in them naturally resists. It's a deeply human response. We don't like feeling that we have to be different in order to be acceptable, that we're being measured against some standard we never agreed to. Even if the changes you're pushing for might genuinely benefit them, the pushing itself creates a counterforce that makes transformation less likely, not more. Think about the times in your own life when you felt pressure from others to change. Maybe it was a parent who wanted you to choose a different career path, a friend who thought you should leave a relationship, a partner who kept suggesting ways you could improve yourself. Even when their concerns had validity, even when part of you knew they might be right, didn't something in you bristle at being told what to do? Didn't you feel, on some level, that they couldn't fully see you, that they were more invested in their vision of who you should be than in accepting who you actually were? That's the double bind we create when we make our love conditional on someone's growth. We think we're helping, but we're actually making it harder for them to change, because genuine transformation rarely happens under pressure. It happens in environments of acceptance, where people feel safe enough to look honestly at themselves without the fear of rejection if they don't measure up. Everyone carries something. One of the most important shifts we can make is moving from judgment to curiosity. When someone behaves in ways that frustrate or disappoint us, our immediate impulse is often to evaluate and critique. Why don't they see this? Why can't they do better? Why do they keep making the same mistakes? These questions come from a place of exasperation, and they create a narrative in which the other person is simply failing to rise to a reasonable standard. But what if we ask different questions? What experiences shaped them into who they are today? What fears might be driving their behavior? What wounds are they still carrying that make certain kinds of growth feel threatening or impossible right now? What limitations, whether internal or external, might be constraining their choices in ways I can't fully see? Every single person you encounter is carrying something. Everyone has a history of pain, of disappointment, of moments that fundamentally altered how they see themselves and the world. Some people carry trauma from childhood, abuse, neglect, abandonment, or simply the accumulated weight of never feeling good enough. Some carry grief from losses that reshaped their entire landscape. Some carry shame about who they are or what they've done. Some carry anxiety that makes every decision feel fraught with danger. Some carry depression that drains the colour from everything and makes even basic functioning feel like climbing a mountain. You can't always see what someone is carrying. Often, the people who seem most put together are working the hardest to hold themselves together. The person who frustrates you with their resistance to change might be using every ounce of their energy just to maintain their current equilibrium. What looks like stubbornness from the outside might be self-protection from the inside. What seems like a refusal to grow might actually be a terror of falling apart. This doesn't excuse harmful behavior. It doesn't mean you have to accept mistreatment or abandon your boundaries. But it does shift the frame from what's wrong with them to what happened to them. And that shift opens up space for compassion, for patience, for the recognition that everyone is doing the best they can from their current level of awareness and emotional capacity. There's a concept in psychology called theory of mind, the ability to recognize that other people have their own thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and perspectives that differ from your own. It seems simple, but in practice, we often forget this. We assume that because something is obvious to us, it should be obvious to everyone. We assume that because we would handle a situation in a certain way, others should handle it that way too. We forget that we're all operating from completely different software, shaped by completely different experiences. When you really internalize this, when you truly grasp that the person in front of you is working with a completely different set of tools, shaped by a completely different history, it becomes much easier to soften your expectations.
Tapping like your red heel time, rain on my window. Tapping like your red heel time. I open up to shadows, just that hell on 47.
You can still hope for growth. You can still offer support when it's wanted. But you stop being quite so attached to outcomes you can't control. You stop taking their limitations as a personal affront. You start meeting them where they actually are instead of where you wish they were. The illusion of control. Much of our frustration with others stems from a fundamental illusion, the belief that if we just say the right thing, or set the right example, or apply the right amount of pressure, we can make someone change. We think love, logic, or persuasion should be enough to shift someone's trajectory. And when it doesn't work, when they continue down paths we can clearly see are destructive, when they reject the wisdom we're offering, when they remain stuck in patterns that hurt them, we feel not just disappointed, but somehow personally failed. But here's the uncomfortable truth. You have virtually no control over another person's growth journey. You can offer resources, perspective, and support. You can set boundaries that protect your own well-being. You can model healthier ways of being. But you cannot make someone ready for change before they're ready. You cannot force awareness on someone who isn't yet able to see. You cannot love someone into transformation, no matter how pure your intentions or how desperate your hope. This is one of the hardest lessons to learn, especially when it comes to people we care deeply about. We watch them struggle with addiction, or stay in toxic relationships, or repeat self-destructive patterns, and we feel helpless because we are helpless. We can see the path forward so clearly, but they cannot or will not take it, and there's nothing we can do to bridge that gap through sheer force of will. The paradox is that letting go of control often creates more space for growth than trying to maintain it. When you stop pushing, when you stop trying to orchestrate someone's development, a different kind of relationship becomes possible. One with less tension, less resentment, less subtle manipulation. One where the other person doesn't have to constantly defend themselves against your attempts to fix them. One where they just might, feel safe enough to look at themselves honestly without the threat of your disappointment hanging over every choice they make. This doesn't mean becoming passive or indifferent. It means shifting from "I need to make you change" to "I support your growth, but it's yours to navigate." It means accepting that your role isn't to be someone's savior or architect, but simply to be present with them as they figure out their own path, even when that path includes mistakes you could help them avoid. There's a particular kind of arrogance that can creep into our attempts to help others, even when those attempts come from genuine love. We assume we know what's best for someone else. We assume our perspective on their life is more accurate than their own. We assume that the changes we think they need are actually the changes that would serve them best. But how can we really know? How can we fully understand the complexity of someone else's inner world, the trade-offs they're navigating, the fears and desires that shape their choices? Sometimes, what looks like failure to grow is actually someone protecting something valuable in themselves. Sometimes, what looks like stubbornness is actually integrity, a refusal to change in ways that would violate their core values or sense of self. Sometimes what looks like self-destruction from the outside is actually the only way someone knows how to cope with pain that would otherwise be overwhelming. This isn't to say that all choices are equally valid, or that we should never challenge the people we love, but it does mean approaching them with humility, recognizing that our vision for their life is just that, ours, not theirs. And that ultimately they have to be the ones to decide what growth means for them and when they're ready to pursue it. Different paces, different paths. If you've ever learned a new skill, you know that growth isn't linear. There are periods of rapid progress followed by plateaus that seem to last forever. There are moments of insight and breakthrough, and long stretches where nothing seems to be changing at all. There are skills that come easily, and others that require years of patient practice. There are areas where you excel, and areas where you struggle despite your best efforts. The same is true for emotional and psychological growth. We all develop at different rates in different areas. Someone might be incredibly emotionally intelligent in some ways and completely stunted in others. They might be ready to work on certain issues and completely unable to face others. They might make rapid progress on one front and remain stuck for years on another. And beyond individual variation, there are also different developmental trajectories. Some people do their deepest growing in their 20s. Others don't really begin to examine themselves until midlife. Some people have dramatic conversion experiences that reshape everything quickly. Others evolve slowly, almost imperceptibly, over decades. Some people's growth looks explosive from the outside, but is actually quite fragile. Others appear unchanged for years and then suddenly demonstrate a depth of wisdom that clearly took a long time to cultivate. When you accept that everyone moves at their own pace, you stop measuring people against some universal timeline of how quickly they should be evolving. You stop feeling frustrated that someone in their 40s is still working through issues you addressed in your 20s, or that someone hasn't achieved the self-awareness you think they should have by now. You recognize that their journey is theirs, not yours, and that comparing timelines is meaningless. This is especially important in close relationships. We often have unspoken expectations about how our partners, family members, or friends should grow alongside us. When we make changes in our lives, maybe we start therapy or develop a meditation practice or commit to healthier habits, we sometimes unconsciously expect the people around us to make similar changes, and when they don't, we can feel abandoned or betrayed, as if their failure to keep pace with us is a rejection of our own growth. But people don't grow in lockstep. Sometimes you'll be miles ahead of someone in one area, while they're miles ahead of you in another. Sometimes you'll grow toward each other, and sometimes you'll grow apart. Sometimes someone you care about will remain in a place you've moved beyond, and you'll have to decide whether you can still love them there, or whether the gap has become too wide to bridge. There's real grief in that recognition. It hurts to realize that someone you love might never develop the capacity for the kind of relationship you're craving. It hurts to accept that certain conversations will never be possible, that certain kinds of support will never be available, that the connection you're hoping for might require a version of them that doesn't yet exist and may never exist. But there's also freedom in it. When you stop waiting for someone to catch up, you can be more fully present with who they are now. You can appreciate the ways they do show up, the ways they do love you, the ways they do contribute to your life, even if those ways don't match your ideal. You can let go of the constant undercurrent of frustration and disappointment and simply enjoy what is, rather than mourning what isn't. The depth we can reach. Not every relationship can or should go deep. This is another uncomfortable truth that we often resist. We want to believe that if we're just open enough, vulnerable enough, patient enough, we can create profound connection with anyone, but the reality is that depth requires certain conditions, and not everyone has the capacity or willingness to create those conditions. Some people will only ever meet you at the surface. They'll engage with the externals of life, weather, work, weekend plans, but shy away from anything more substantial. They might not have the self-awareness to explore deeper territory. They might not have the emotional vocabulary to articulate complex feelings. They might be too defended, too afraid, too exhausted to go beneath the surface, or they might simply not be interested in that kind of connection, preferring relationships that feel lighter and less demanding. And that's okay. Surface relationships serve important functions. They provide social connection, pleasant company, shared activities. They're part of the ecosystem of a full life. The problem comes when we expect surface relationships to provide depth, or when we exhaust ourselves trying to create intimacy where the conditions for it simply don't exist. Other people will walk beside you, meeting you at the same level, engaging with similar questions, offering the kind of reciprocal vulnerability and support that creates real intimacy. These are the relationships where you feel truly seen and known, where you can show up fully without editing yourself, where both people are invested in each other's growth and well-being. And then there are the people who will walk behind, who are at an earlier stage of development or awareness, who look to you more as a guide or mentor than as an equal. These relationships can be meaningful and rewarding in their own way, but they're not the same as peer relationships. There's an inherent asymmetry that limits how deep they can go. The key is learning to recognize what kind of relationship you have with each person in your life and adjusting your expectations accordingly. This isn't about categorizing people hierarchically or devaluing certain relationships. It's about being realistic about what each relationship can offer and what it cannot. When you expect everyone to be capable of deep connection, you set yourself up for constant disappointment. You find yourself frustrated with your colleague who never wants to talk about anything meaningful, or your sibling who deflects every attempt at vulnerability, or your friend who seems content with superficial interactions. But when you accept that different relationships exist at different levels, you can appreciate each one for what it is rather than resenting it for what it isn't. This also means being more selective about where you invest your deepest energy. You don't have to pour yourself into every relationship equally. You can have warm, friendly connections with people who can't or won't go deep, while reserving your most intimate sharing for the relationships that can truly hold it. This isn't about being fake or withholding. It's about being discerning, about matching your level of sharing to the capacity of the relationship. And sometimes you'll find that relationships shift levels over time. Someone who could only meet you at the surface might, through their own growth, become capable of more depth. Or someone you once shared deep connection with might, for various reasons, need to pull back to something lighter. These shifts can be painful, but they're also natural. Accepting them rather than resisting them allows the relationship to evolve into whatever form best serves both people. Compassion without compromise. Here's where we need to be very careful, because loving people where they are can be misinterpreted as accepting anything and everything from people regardless of how it affects you. And that's not what this is about at all. Compassion doesn't require you to tolerate mistreatment. Understanding why someone behaves in hurtful ways doesn't mean you have to keep exposing yourself to that hurt. Recognizing that someone is doing the best they can from their current level of awareness doesn't mean you can't set firm boundaries when their best isn't good enough to keep you safe or whole. This is the both, and that so many people struggle to hold. We think we have to choose between judgment and acceptance, between boundaries and compassion, between holding people accountable and loving them where they are. But these aren't actually opposites. You can have compassion for someone's struggles while still insisting they not take those struggles out on you. You can understand why someone is the way they are while still choosing not to have them in your life. You can wish someone well from a distance while recognizing that closeness would be harmful to your well-being. Setting boundaries is actually an act of loving both yourself and the other person where you both are. It's saying, I recognize that you're struggling with things I may not fully understand, and I have compassion for that. And I also recognize that I have limits to what I can handle, and I have to honor those limits. It's refusing to pretend you're more resilient than you are, or that your needs matter less than someone else's limitations. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is create distance. This is especially true in relationships where someone's behavior is actively harmful, whether that's addiction, abuse, manipulation, or chronic dysfunction that keeps pulling you into chaos. You can love someone and still decide that loving them requires you to step back, to stop enabling their patterns, to stop sacrificing your own well-being on the altar of their potential. This is where acceptance becomes more nuanced. You accept that this is who they are right now, with all their limitations and struggles. You accept that you cannot change them or save them. And you also accept that you have the right and responsibility to protect yourself, even if that means disappointing them or letting them face consequences you wish you could shield them from. There's often guilt that comes with this kind of boundary setting, especially if you've internalized the message that real love is unconditional and self-sacrificing. But unconditional love doesn't mean love without boundaries. It means your love for someone isn't contingent on them being different than they are, but it doesn't mean you have to keep them in your life in the same way, regardless of their behavior. You can love someone unconditionally and still say, I can't have you in my home anymore, or I can't keep having this conversation, or I need to take a break from this relationship. You can hold space for who they are while also holding space for who you are and what you need. These aren't contradictory, they're both necessary. And sometimes, boundaries themselves become the catalyst for growth. When you stop absorbing the impact of someone's dysfunction, when you stop cushioning them from the consequences of their choices, you create space for them to potentially see things they couldn't see before. Not always. Sometimes people just move on to find someone else who will play the same role you played. But sometimes, the loss of a relationship they valued becomes the wake-up call that their own efforts couldn't create. So you set the boundary not to teach them a lesson or manipulate them into changing, but because it's genuinely what you need, and then you let go of what they do with that. You trust that their journey is theirs to navigate, that the consequences they face are theirs to learn from or not learn from, and that your job is not to control outcomes, but simply to honor your own truth about what you can and cannot sustain. When you're the one being pushed. It's worth turning this lens on ourselves as well. If learning to love people where they are is important, then we also need to notice when we're on the receiving end of that dynamic, when we're the ones being pushed to change, being measured against someone else's expectations, being loved conditionally based on how well we conform to their vision of who we should be. How does it feel when someone is constantly trying to improve you, fix you, shape you into their ideal version of who you could become? Even when their intentions are good, even when some of their feedback might be valid, there's something exhausting and demoralizing about being someone's project. It's hard to relax into yourself when you're constantly being evaluated. It's hard to trust someone's love when it feels like it comes with an unspoken contract about who you need to become to keep earning it. And yet, most of us have done this to others without even realizing it. We've had that friend we keep trying to help even though they haven't asked for help. We've had that partner whose habits or perspectives we keep trying to change. We've had that family member whose life choices we can't stop commenting on. We tell ourselves we're being supportive, but what we're often really doing is trying to mold them into a version of themselves that would make us more comfortable. So part of loving people where they are involves a rigorous self-examination. Where are you demanding too much? Where are you being too critical? Where are you projecting your own anxieties or preferences onto someone else's journey? Where are you making your love conditional in subtle or not so subtle ways? This is hard work because it requires admitting that our attempts to help might actually be causing harm. It requires acknowledging that our vision for someone else's life might be more about us than them. It requires letting go of the satisfying feeling of being right, being the one who sees clearly, being the one who could fix everything if only they would listen. But it's also liberating. When you stop trying to control or improve everyone around you, you get to use that energy for your own growth instead. You get to focus on becoming who you want to be rather than managing everyone else's development. You get to have relationships that feel more spacious and less burdened by agendas. And often, when you stop pushing, when you truly let people be, something unexpected happens. They soften toward you. They open up in ways they couldn't when they felt defensive. They might even become more receptive to growth because they no longer feel like they have to resist your pressure to maintain their autonomy. Or they might not change at all, and you discover that you can be okay with that. You can love them anyway. You can enjoy what the relationship does offer without constantly mourning what it doesn't. You can let them be exactly who they are without needing them to be anything else. The practice of presence. At its core, loving people where they are is about presence. It's about showing up for what is rather than what you wish were true. It's about being with someone as they actually are in this moment, not as you hope they'll become in some future moment. This kind of presence is rare and precious. Most of the time, even when we're physically with someone, we're not fully there. We're thinking about what we want to say next, or judging what they just said, or planning how to steer the conversation, or comparing them to others, or measuring them against our expectations. We're relating to our ideas about them rather than to them directly. But when you can truly be present, when you can set aside your agenda and your analysis and your hopes for who they might become, something shifts. The other person can feel it. They can sense that they're being seen and accepted rather than evaluated and found wanting, and in that space of genuine acceptance, they can be more fully themselves, which is often the very condition that makes growth possible. Think about the times when you felt most able to grow or change. Chances are, it wasn't in response to someone's criticism or pressure. It was more likely in the presence of someone who accepted you completely, who saw you clearly, flaws and all, and loved you anyway. That kind of unconditional, positive regard creates safety, and in that safety, you can afford to look honestly at yourself, to take risks, to try new ways of being. This doesn't mean you can single-handedly create the conditions for someone else's transformation just by accepting them. Their growth is still their responsibility, still dependent on factors you can't control. But you can stop being an obstacle to their growth by removing the pressure and judgment that often keep people defended and stuck. Presence also means accepting the full reality of who someone is, including the parts you don't like or agree with. It means not mentally editing them as you interact with them, not constantly wishing they would say something different or be some other way. It means being genuinely curious about their perspective, even when it differs radically from yours. It means listening to understand rather than listening to debate or correct. This is especially challenging with people we're closest to be accepting and present with a stranger or acquaintance than with a partner or family member whose choices directly impact our lives. But that's also where the practice matters most. When you can be truly present with your partner's anxiety, even though you wish they were more relaxed, or with your parents' rigidity, even though you wish they were more open-minded, or with your friends' choices, even though you think they're making mistakes, that's when you're really practicing unconditional love. That's when you're choosing connection over correctness, relationship over being right. And paradoxically, that presence often leads to deeper influence than any amount of pushing ever could. When people feel truly seen and accepted, they're more likely to value your perspective, to be open to your feedback, to consider your suggestions. Not because they feel pressured to, but because they trust that your input comes from a place of genuine care rather than conditional approval. The wisdom of letting go. There's a particular kind of wisdom in accepting that some relationships will never be what you hoped they would be. A wisdom in recognizing that your parent may never be able to give you the unconditional support you needed as a child. That your sibling may never be the close confidant you wish you had. That your friend may never develop the emotional depth you're craving. That your partner may never change in the ways you think would make the relationship work better. This wisdom isn't the same as cynicism or giving up. It's more like a clear-eyed realism that allows you to grieve what isn't available and then make conscious choices about how to move forward. You can decide to stay in the relationship with adjusted expectations. You can decide to create distance. You can decide to find elsewhere what this relationship cannot provide. What you can't do, at least not without causing yourself ongoing suffering, is continue to demand that the relationship be something it fundamentally isn't. You can't keep hoping that this time, finally, your emotionally unavailable parent will show up differently. You can't keep believing that if you just explain yourself better, your partner will suddenly understand something they've shown no capacity to understand. You can't keep investing in someone's potential while ignoring who they consistently show themselves to be. Letting go of who you wish someone were so you can be present with who they actually are is an act of profound courage. It requires mourning. It requires acknowledging that you don't get to write someone else's story, no matter how much you wish you could. It requires accepting your own powerlessness over another person's growth trajectory. But it also opens up enormous freedom. When you're no longer using so much energy trying to change someone, that energy becomes available for other things. For your own development, for relationships that are more reciprocal. for activities and pursuits that actually feed you rather than drain you, for the simple pleasure of appreciating people for what they offer rather than resenting them for what they don't. And sometimes letting go creates the space for something new to emerge in the relationship. When you stop trying so hard, when you release your agenda, when you accept someone fully, they might surprise you. Not always, not even usually. But sometimes the very act of being released from your expectations allows them to step into a freer version of themselves. Or the relationship might just be what it is, and you might find that you're okay with that you can love someone at a sustainable distance, that you can have affection without intimacy, connection without depth, care without closeness, that not every relationship has to meet every need, and that's actually fine. Self-love in the equation. Throughout this exploration of loving people where they are, there's been an important thread running underneath. You also have to love yourself where you are. This isn't separate from the practice of accepting others. It's fundamental to it. If you're constantly judging yourself, constantly pushing yourself to be different, constantly measuring yourself against some impossible standard, then you're going to struggle to offer true acceptance to others. How you treat yourself sets the template for how you engage with everyone else. If you can't tolerate your own limitations, you won't be able to tolerate theirs. If you can't have compassion for your own struggles, you won't have genuine compassion for theirs. Loving yourself where you are means acknowledging that you too are on a journey, that you too have growing to do, that you too have blind spots and limitations and areas where you're not yet who you want to become, and that all of that is okay. You're allowed to be imperfect, you're allowed to be still figuring things out, you're allowed to be exactly where you are in your development, without that being a source of shame or inadequacy. This kind of self-acceptance isn't about complacency. You can still have goals and aspirations. You can still work on yourself and try to grow, but there's a profound difference between growth that comes from self-rejection, from a feeling that you're not okay as you are, and growth that comes from self-love, from a desire to develop your potential while fully accepting yourself in the present. When your growth is rooted in self-acceptance rather than self-rejection, it's more sustainable. You're not constantly exhausting yourself trying to outrun some fundamental sense of unworthiness. You're not measuring your value by how quickly you progress or how completely you transform. You can have patience with yourself, the same patience you're learning to extend to others. And crucially, loving yourself where you are means honoring your needs and limits. It means recognizing that just as others have constraints on what they can offer, you have constraints too. You can't be everything to everyone. You can't meet every need, fix every problem, heal every wound. You have finite energy, finite capacity, finite resources. This is where boundaries come back into play, but this time in relation to yourself. You have to be willing to disappoint people sometimes. You have to be willing to say no, to protect your energy, to prioritize your well-being, even when someone else needs something from you. This isn't selfish, it's necessary. You can't sustainably love others from a place of depletion and resentment. So when you're practicing loving people where they are, you're also practicing loving yourself where you are, You're accepting your own limitations while working within them. You're being honest about what you can and cannot handle. You're treating yourself with the same compassion and patience you're trying to extend to others. And paradoxically, when you take better care of yourself, you often have more capacity to be present and accepting with others. When you're not running on empty, when you're not sacrificing your own needs in service of everyone else's, you can show up more generously. You can offer real acceptance rather than resentful tolerance. You can be genuinely present rather than desperately hoping they'll change so you don't have to keep expending energy you don't have. The ripple effect. When you shift from trying to change people to loving them where they are, the effects ripple outward in ways you might not expect. Your relationships become less tense, less burdened by unspoken agendas. People feel safer around you because they're not constantly being evaluated or pushed. You become someone others can relax with, which is increasingly rare in a world where everyone seems to have advice about how everyone else should be living. This doesn't mean you become a passive presence in people's lives. You can still offer perspective when it's wanted. You can still share your experience and wisdom. You can still challenge people you love when you think it would serve them. But it all comes from a different place. Not from a need for them to be different, but from a genuine desire to support them in their own journey, whatever form that takes. And as you practice this kind of acceptance, you might notice something interesting. Your own capacity for growth often accelerates when you're not using all your energy trying to manage and improve everyone around you. You have more resources available for your own development. When you stop projecting your anxieties onto others' journeys, you can face your own more directly. When you accept that everyone's path is their own, you become freer to walk yours authentically. There's also something that shifts in how you experience disappointment. When you fully accept that people are who they are, when you truly let go of needing them to be different, disappointment becomes less frequent and less intense. You're not constantly running into the gap between expectation and reality because you've learned to expect reality. This doesn't mean you stop wanting good things for the people you love. You can still hope they find healing or happiness or peace. But your hopes become lighter, less attached, less demanding. They're more like wishes you send out into the universe rather than outcomes you're invested in controlling. And that lighter quality makes them easier to hold. You might also find that you become more discerning about who you invest deeply in. When you're not trying to change everyone, when you're accepting people as they are, it becomes clearer which relationships actually nourish you and which ones don't. You can make more conscious choices about where to spend your time and energy. You can create a life that's more aligned with who you actually are rather than who you think you should be. And perhaps most importantly, you model something powerful for others. In a culture that's constantly telling us we need to be better, do more, fix ourselves, your acceptance becomes a radical act. It shows people that it's possible to love without an agenda. It demonstrates that growth doesn't require harsh judgment or relentless pressure. It offers an alternative to the exhausting cycle of self-improvement and self-criticism that so many of us are trapped in. The sacred ordinary. There's something sacred about simply being with people as they are, about sitting with your aging parent and accepting their repetitive stories and diminishing capacity instead of wishing they were sharp, like they used to be. About spending time with your child exactly as they are today, instead of projecting forward to who they might become. About being with your partner in their anxiety or sadness instead of trying to fix it or make it go away. These ordinary moments of acceptance, unadorned by any agenda, free from any push toward change, are where real intimacy lives. They're where people feel most fully seen and most deeply loved. And they're increasingly rare in a world that treats every interaction as an opportunity for optimization. We've become so focused on potential, on growth, on becoming, that we've lost the art of simply being. We can't just enjoy a conversation, we have to turn it into a teaching moment. We can't just appreciate someone's company, we have to analyze their patterns and point out their blind spots. We can't just love, we have to love strategically, conditionally, with an eye toward encouraging the best version of the person. But what if the best version of someone is not some future possibility, but the imperfect, struggling, beautiful human sitting in front of you right now? What if this moment, with all its limitations and disappointments, is enough? What if they are enough, exactly as they are? This isn't about lowering your standards or abandoning hope for growth, yours or anyone else's. It's about recognizing that growth happens best in soil of acceptance, not in the harsh climate of constant evaluation. It's about understanding that people unfold in their own time, in their own way, and that your job is not to be the gardener forcing blooms, but simply to create conditions where blooming becomes possible. Those conditions include patience, they include space. They include the kind of love that doesn't demand anything in return, that doesn't attach itself to outcomes, that simply says, I see you, I'm here. You don't have to be anyone other than who you are right now for that to be true. Coming home. Ultimately, learning to love people where they are is about coming home, both to yourself and to reality as it actually is. It's about releasing the exhausting effort of trying to reshape the world to match your preferences, and instead learning to meet it where it is. It's about finding peace, not in getting what you want, but in wanting what you have. Not in making people different, but in appreciating them as they are. This doesn't mean you stop having preferences or desires. It doesn't mean you become passive or resigned. It means you hold your preferences more lightly, you pursue your desires without attachment, you engage actively with life while accepting that you can't control most of what happens. And in that acceptance, there's a paradox. You often get more of what you were seeking than you did when you were grasping for it. When you stop trying to force intimacy, it becomes more possible. When you release your grip on someone's growth, they sometimes start growing. When you accept people as they are, they often reveal depths you never knew were there. But even when they don't, even when nothing external changes, something internal shifts. You become freer, less burdened, more at peace. You can be with people without the constant undercurrent of wanting them to be different. You can love without the exhausting work of trying to improve everyone. You can simply be present, which is perhaps the greatest gift you can offer anyone, including yourself. This is the work of a lifetime. You won't get it right all the time. You'll still find yourself frustrated with people, still catch yourself trying to change them, still struggle with accepting limitations, both theirs and yours. But each time you notice and come back to acceptance, each time you choose presence over pressure, each time you love someone where they are instead of where you wish they were, you're practicing something profound. You're learning that love doesn't require people to be different. You're discovering that acceptance isn't resignation, but liberation. You're finding that when you stop trying to control everyone's journey, you have more energy for your own. You're coming to understand that everyone is doing the best they can from where they are, and that includes you. And in that understanding, something softens. The world becomes a little less hostile, a little more workable. People become a little easier to be with. Life becomes a little more spacious. Not because anything external has changed, but because you've changed how you're relating to it all. You've learned to love people where they are, and in doing so, you've learned to love yourself where you are. You've learned to love life as it is. You've learned that this moment, imperfect and incomplete as it may be, is actually enough. That you are enough, that they are enough. And maybe that's all love ever really needed to be.